I mentioned earlier that our guest was an artist who has been recording for over 60 years. He was an immediate smash prior to 1900. He was known as the peer of all banjo players, and he still is today, at 83, the greatest banjoist of all time. Fred Van Eps. We took our tape recorder to Union Station and talked to Fred between train connections. Well, I'm here at Union Station. My name is Lou Green. I'm catching a gentleman here between trains on his way to Lewiston, Pennsylvania, to a banjo rally, and it's none other than Fred Van Eps, probably the greatest banjo player that's ever lived. At least he is in my book. When I was a young lad, first starting to listen to phonograph records, the Fred Van Eps records, of course, were very much a part of my library. I was learning the banjo. Fred Van Eps is still active today, and Fred, just about when was that first recording of yours made?
Well, the first for the Edison Company was in 1897.
And I suppose you have a few of these old copies yourself? Some of the
yes, I have quite a few cylinders, and they're all in good condition. They haven't. They've been properly protected against changes of atmosphere.
That was the old brown wax stuff, the early...
Oh, yes, the wax cylinders. And later on, they were made out of an indestructible material, which, of course, will last a lifetime.
Well, I have a great many of these, Fred, in the cylinders, and then, of course, I have some of your early Victor, but I suppose that's after the Edison discs came out also. I think the Edison discs made their appearance in 1912, beginning.
Well, that was when I really commenced to get busy, and I was working for 17 companies at that time.
I imagine so. I've got you on probably 16 labels.
Yes.
Where's that other
Plenty
one?
of labels.
Fred, one thing I want to get straight here now, and straight out to everybody that hears this broadcast. You play the five-string banjo, and in the field of banjo, of course, there are, I think in more recent years, people have been through the circus players and some of the stage presentations and so on, have been more familiar with the long necker, the plectrum, and tenor in the dance bands. But the old five-string banjo, this was the real banjo. Am I right?
Oh, yes, that's the original. And until about 1912, it was the only banjo.
And that's plucked with the fingers. The way I describe it to people that don't know too much about it, it's played much in the manner that Segovia or some of the concert guitarists play a guitar.
A harp is played with the bare fingers.
And some of the, well, let's call them folk music banjo players of today, I guess their fingers must be tender, Fred. They're using picks on their fingers.
Oh, well, that's a style of playing. Now, this is really banjo.
Have you seen these claws they're using? They're like the old Hawaiian guitar
You have
players.
to use anything, a trowel or a clamshell or anything. Did you ever hear how the tenor banjo started?
No, I'd love to hear it.
Well, have you ever seen the automatic banjos that play with a paper roll?
I've only seen pictures of them, Fred, but I never actually saw
They
them.
came out in the 90s. A violinist by the name of Louis Stepner, who lived in Venice, California, was called into a saloon to tune one of these automatic banjos. And it didn't take him long to discover that it was tuned in fifths. And he got thinking over, now, if I had a banjo that was tuned in fifths, I could learn to play it in a very short time. So he had J.B. Shaw of Chicago make up a tenor banjo, and that was the first one of its kind.
I'll be doggone. I know that, was he a cellist or?
He played violin.
Violin.
Yeah.
Because I know that a lot of, Harry Reeser was originally a cello player.
Fiddle, I thought, wasn't
Well,
it?
I think he also plays a cello, and and it always occurred to me that some cello player had something to do with that. Well, Fred, I have, through your generosity, an album that you cut not too long ago, and it's just my opinion that you play better than ever. Am I right?
Oh, yes, the fingers are getting better all the time. The impossible is getting easier by the minute.
And it's easy to compare because you do some of the same tunes on the new ones that you did.
Well, I have a better system.
You have. Are you going to divulge that to the
yes,
public?
yes. I think I'm the only one that ever analyzed the situation and found out what the working tools, your fingers, are capable of doing, and then building a system around that. Whereas before, they built the system first and made the fingers conform to it, and the fingers said no.
Well, is it a different way of plucking the string?
No, but it's using the fingers in the natural rotation. Thumb 1, 2, the way they're placed on the hand.
I see.
That's the way the Lord made them.
Yes.
He knew his business too.
Well,
that's the way you should use them.
I see. And that, you would think that would be backwards.
Oh, no.
Wouldn't you?
No. If I had a banjo here, I could soon give you a demonstration. With this system, it's possible to play up to 14 notes a second, which is velocity, you will admit.
Gosh.
And if you can play it twice as fast as it should go, you can surely play it at its proper tempo.
Yes. Well, it makes sense, plucking with the fingers because you're so limited with a pick. And any of the plectrum styles.
You can't play a synchronous chord with a pick.
No, you can't.
No.
Fred, I don't think that you just picked this thing up, and worked it out. I think that you had a little talent to start with. Would you agree?
Very little inspiration, a lot of perspiration. I think
there were no teachers around in those days.
No, and well, I looked everybody over because you could learn a little from everybody. Then put that together, and if you have a good imagination and a few ideas, just go on from there.
I think probably the banjo players in your day were when you started were probably Osmond and Ruby
Osmond
Brooks.
was my idol when I started.
He was,
and he was very good at it. Have you got any of the old timers?
I have quite a few Osmond records.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was a rough player, but his tempo wasn't good. He accented where he should, but he didn't keep it up. He deteriorated.
Did you know Diamond and Curry?
Well, they weren't in his class at all.
Yes, I know. I can tell that.
And Tommy Glynn, ever heard of him?
No.
I think that's where Osmond got all his stuff.
That must have been earlier.
That's before before your time.
Well, that was Nola, played by Fred Van Eps, the world's greatest banjoist, and still recording at the age of 83.